You remember it, right? The big orange couch, the green slime, those wild, totally chaotic shows that were basically the wallpaper of our childhoods? Nickelodeon back in the 90s and 2000s? Man, it wasn't just a TV channel. It was everything. It's what we rushed home from school to watch. But what if I told you that behind all that laughter, behind those bright colors, there was a story unfolding that was, well, much, much darker. A story that kind of forces you to rethink everything you thought you knew about your favorite shows. This is the picture that just stopped the internet cold. It's a face a lot of us recognize, but he looks like a ghost of the kid we used to watch. And look, this isn't just some random tragedy. This is the final stop on a very long road that started inside the very TV studios that made him a star. So the question is, how in the world does it get to this point? To really understand the whole system, you first have to understand the human cost. So we're going to start with the story of one actor, Tyler Chase. He was a familiar face who ended up in a devastatingly unfamiliar place. His journey from a TV set to the street shows us the first major cracks in that bright orange Nickelodeon world.
So Tyler Chase played Martin Corley, that quirky, lovable kid on Ned's Declassified. The show was a big hit, but as soon as it wrapped in 2007, his acting career just stopped. By 2014, he starts posting these really strange, kind of dark videos on YouTube talking about his battle with bipolar disorder. Then after 2021, he just vanished. Poof. Until that shocking TikTok video pops up in 2025. His old co-stars actually rushed out to find him, they got him a hotel room, but he reportedly just trashed it and left. His family eventually had to announce that he refuses any help, so they couldn't accept donations for him anymore. It's an absolutely heartbreaking spiral. You know, it's really easy to look at Tyler's story and just write it off as a one-off, personal tragedy. But what if it isn't? What if his collapse wasn't some random fluke, but the predictable end result of a system that basically chewed up kids for fame and profit? To find that answer, we have to go back. Back to the man who built the entire Nickelodeon empire.
To get what went so wrong here, we have to talk about Dan Schneider. For a long time, this guy was the single most powerful person in children's television. He just had the magic touch. He was the creative genius behind all the network's biggest hits. But that genius came with a really dark side, one that ended up defining the entire culture of the network.
So Schneider actually started out as an actor himself, usually cast as the funny, overweight friend. The guy was smart. He got into Harvard, but he dropped out to chase that Hollywood dream. When acting didn't quite work out the way he wanted, he found out he had a real talent for writing. And in 1994, Nickelodeon hired him. And that single decision, man, it would change the network and the lives of so many kids forever. His first big creation was All That, which was basically Saturday Night Live for tweens. It was a risky idea, but it was a massive hit that ran for 10 years. And from there, the hits just kept coming. He discovered a 10-year-old Amanda Bynes and literally built the Amanda Show completely around her. Then came Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious. He wasn't just a producer at this point. He was building an actual empire. This quote right here really captures a huge psychological shift. The actor who was never the main character was suddenly the ultimate authority. He controlled everything, the scripts, the casting, the entire future of anyone who wanted a career at Nickelodeon. And with that kind of absolute power, his behavior reportedly started to get weird. He became volatile, demanding, and no one could tell him no. On screen, his shows were bright, they were funny, they were full of joy. But the environment he created behind the scenes, it was anything but. So now we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the culture of discomfort and fear that he built on his sets. A culture that had really serious consequences for the young people working for him. Okay, so multiple sources have described a really toxic workplace. Child labor laws were apparently just ignored, with kids working these exhausting long hours. Parents, who were legally supposed to be there, were often encouraged to leave, which left the kids totally isolated with the crew. Female writers and producers reported that Schneider would frequently ask them for shoulder and neck massages. His temper was the stuff of legend, and his jokes were often really demeaning, especially towards women. And then there was this bizarre constant thing with feet. Jokes and scenes about feet were in almost all of his shows. The whole environment was just built on fear and control. Look, a toxic work environment is one thing, but this culture of fear and control at Nickelodeon did a lot more than just make people uncomfortable. It created the perfect cover for something way more sinister. It basically became a hunting ground for predators who were working right under Schneider. Let's just look at two documented cases here. First, you have Jason Handy. He was a production assistant who used his job to groom a 12-year-old actress online. He sent her horrible material, and when he was finally caught, police found over 10,000 illicit files on his computer. He got 6 years, got out, and was arrested for the exact same crime in 2014. And then you have Brian Peck. He was a respected dialogue coach on Schneider shows, and for years, he systematically abused a young Drake Bell.
The case of Brian Peck it perfectly shows the rot that was at the heart of this system. Publicly, he was this beloved figure who had coached huge stars like Leonardo DiCaprio, but in private, he was a monster. He strategically pushed Drake Bell's father out of the picture, convincing the family that he was a safe guardian. And in this deeply disturbing twist, it later came out that Peck was pen pals with the infamous serial killer John Wayne Gacy. He even had artwork from Gacy in his home that he would show to kids.
When Peck was finally arrested after Drake Bell found the courage to come forward, he was sentenced to just 16 months in prison. 16 months. Why so little time? Well, partly because 41 powerful people in Hollywood wrote letters to the judge defending him. We're talking famous actors, directors, producers. Some letters talked about what a great guy he was, while others, as this quote shows, went so far as to suggest his child victim was somehow the one to blame. It is a sickening example of an industry protecting its own, no matter the cost to a child.
So after going through this environment, being overworked, manipulated, and in some cases horrifically abused, what happened to these kids when the cameras finally stopped rolling? Well, the aftermath is a legacy of trauma, and it brings us right back to where we started.
The pattern here is just impossible to deny. Ananda Bynes, who was Schneider's golden girl, spiraled into a very public battle with addiction and severe mental health issues, which led to her being in a conservatorship for years. Drake Bell has spoken openly about the 2 decades of depression and addiction that he suffered as a direct result of what Brian Peck did to him. And of course, we saw how Tyler Chase's story turned out. These aren't just isolated incidents. They are the direct consequences of a system that treated children like they were disposable.
Eventually, as the #MeToo movement gave people the courage to speak out against powerful abusers, all the complaints against Dan Schneider just became too loud for Nickelodeon to ignore anymore. His position there finally became impossible to defend. So in 2018, more than 2 decades after he started, the network officially cut him loose.
But he didn't just walk away. Nickelodeon reportedly paid him a severance package. A severance package worth $7 million. $7 million to the man who oversaw a culture of toxicity and fear, while so many of his young stars were left with a lifetime of trauma, addiction, and mental health battles.
When you look at the whole picture, from the overworked kids to the predators who were enabled by the system to the tragic fallout for so many of these stars, it is crystal clear that an entire generation of children paid a very, very heavy price for our entertainment. The system that created a Dan Schneider and protected men like Brian Peck has been exposed. But the real question is, has anything truly changed? Or is the machine just waiting for its next young star to burn out?